Hi, this is Michael Sixton, and this is Part 5 of Assessment 2 for Curriculum Studies, Unit 6891, running in Semester 2 of 2011. In this particular unit, we're asked to do a unit of work as Assessment 2, a major project worth 55%, and mine was over 10 weeks, but from that 10 weeks we focused down on 3 classes only, and one of those 3 classes was meant to be seen in some detailed focus. The Assessment 2 had 5 parts, and each of those looked at the unit of work through a different filter, and this last one, Part 5, looks at a few things that you can see on the screen now. 5A, 5B, 5C, 5D, and we'll be covering those in a slideshow with this narration as a film. The first is, of course, the influence from the readings that we've done in the unit, curriculum studies, then how that actual unit of work relates to teaching experiences, actual practice, and then elaborating on the unit of work and personal pedagogies, your own personal views, your own personal pedagogical frameworks that you might use, quite apart from the school and the university and others. And finally, the concept map, which in the end wasn't done using Adobe Fireworks but was done with Microsoft Visio 2007. 5A looked at influences from the readings and the curriculum studies community of practice, which was a forum that ran every week over all of the weeks of the unit. And one of the most important early ones was curriculum as praxis. And what we meant by praxis is action that is morally committed, oriented and informed by traditions in a field. And as you can see from the quote in the next one, Kemison Smith in Churchill and Others of 2011, it's taking the broadest view they can of what it is best to do and then act. So curriculum is part of right action and awareness. In this case, curriculum as praxis is seen as an agent of change in children's lives, in communities and in the world. And I put that one in because it was discussed a lot in the community of practice forums in the online Moodle site, and a lot of people agreed that curriculum as praxis made sense, and I did too. I'd like to think of curriculum as being an agent of change. Another one that was very important to me was the idea of curriculum as being based in an arts curriculum under the umbrella of the humanistic arts, the liberal arts. And of course, in an arts curriculum, the things that can be focused on are dialogue, reflection, metaphor, and imagination. And Churchill and others point that out. And as science fiction is such a very good genre of literature and a way of viewing the world that also uses analogy, metaphor, and a high level of imagination, I thought that the modified arts curriculum approach would be a very good one for this particular unit of work. The other thing that perhaps created more controversy than anything else in the online forums was when we talked about the NAPLAN and other NAP, national testing, standardised or high-stakes testing. And in this case, Brady and Kennedy, most influential writers in curriculum, noted that there is no universalised curriculum reform agenda, that school curriculum reflects its society and its values. And really they're arguing that local curriculum solutions are more likely to cater for what students really need than a centralised curriculum. And that is, of course, an unhappy message to be sending out in 2011, where pre-service teachers arrive out in schools to meet the Australian curriculum, a centralised, federal and uniform body of content and content descriptors. Another one that was very influential in the discussions of curriculum development from the text by Ornstein and Hunkins 2009 was looking at Tyler's basic principles. Now they come all the way back from 1949, and they set out 4 simple basic principles that you follow to develop your curriculum. Most students in the forum and in the community of practice talked about the Tarbar model. And Tarbar, of course, was writing only 20 or so years later than Tyler, and she really wanted to see more design by the users, by teachers and students, and that's not seen in the Tyler's model. Also very popular was the backward development, which, if anybody has been reading parts 1 to 4 of this unit of work, they would see that that is the way it's been developed from me. We've started with the curriculum content descriptions and then moved backwards through activities to a whole range of other things, including TPAC and the IATSL standards. Now, the other point there that I wanted to bring in, apart from backward development, as noted by Wiggins and McTighe, is Dole's writing of 1990 about productive aims for curriculum, including a recommendation for aesthetics, so that curriculum can really aim at aesthetic goals as well. And that's not easily catered for, currently not catered for much at all. In my own particular view, I think it's very important to look for significance in curriculum development, and in this particular one, again focusing on feelings, emotions, imagination, the aesthetic side, capable of fostering students' cognitive, affective, social and spiritual development. Brady and Kennedy go on to talk about curriculum development with its political overlays, which often occur here too. Curriculum development doesn't start at this point and end at that point. It's not linear. In fact, there are a whole range of things that go forward and then jump back, and then there are overlays of other things, as we've said before. Walker's view and in Reynolds' view of 2001, we really have political overlays of what the state wants, the school wants. The Reynolds model seems to be closer, in my experience, to what actually happens with curriculum development than any others, and it's one that I would say was an influential reading. Curriculum alignment is really about making sure that the curriculum itself, the content and the strategies for the activities that go with that content, and the tests that might test the outcomes of that content, they have to be congruent. They have to be aligned. The mastery objectives suggested by Stiggins in Glattorn, Boschy and Whitehead, these are the core, vitally important mastery objectives for curriculum-based tests, made good sense to me and would fit in with my particular unit of work. And finally, the strong division on NAPLAN. In our discussion on this one here, we really came to the argument in the community of practice in the forum that many people thought NAPLAN was testing material that had nothing to do with the curriculum, that it was coming in on literacy and numeracy and wasn't, for instance, involved in the maths, the PE, the English curriculum as such, so they're testing things that weren't being taught. So how valid is it? How aligned is it? How integrated is it? And they were valid concerns and very influential in their stating in the group. Curriculum evaluation finished off this particular area in one way because it looks at how you would evaluate your curriculum. It's a real weakness, as pointed out by Oliva and others in 2009. Often the evaluation is spotty and frequently inconclusive. Now, for my particular study with science fiction, I use Reigeluth, and Reigeluth is not referred to directly by Oliva in 2009, but it's certainly a spiral upwards. So you start at content that is closest to the student's own current understanding, and you move upwards into areas of more difficulty and difficulty until you get to a sort of an abstracted area of conceptual artifacts, and here I follow the work of Bareiter. The actual model for looking at curriculum evaluation that I favoured was by Saylor, Alexander and Lewis of 1981, and you'll note down at the bottom of that table from the Oliva article that in fact curriculum evaluation also evaluates itself. So the evaluation program needs to be evaluated. It's a sort of recursive, iterative process, and all of those things should be occurring at the same time. It's less complex than the SIP model, also talked about by Oliva and others, but this model I think plainly describes how the curriculum evaluation might work in a particular school. Now, the last reading, a recommended reading in the last week of the unit, came from Posner and Rudinsky, and there's some very nice ideas there. I think they are also influential to me. Teachers need to have conversations with students to ascertain their knowledge about an upcoming topic and to find out what sorts of questions they would like to pursue. This should happen before the start of the unit, and the information gathered would be of greater use to the teachers as they plan. Now, I have to say that that hit home to me because in the science fiction unit of work, my SF, that doesn't happen. We run with a basic concept map which pretends to be a sort of needs analysis at the start, which also fits in with the Taba model and others, and that is of course too late, says Posner and Rudinsky. Now, the other points that are noted here on this screen are very important. important, and they're about effective learning, actually is recommended to require emotional involvement and some degree of personal commitment. Now, the last point from Posner and Rudinsky comes with the idea that you should have concrete examples and analyses followed by a more open-ended writing response. And that was for an example of learning poetry in the long article that fit in very nicely with the writings of Posner and Rudinsky. Now, I have in my unit of work a great deal of use of the CLC, the portal in use by the ACT government for virtual learning environment, just like Moodle. And in my own experiences, students respond well to this in English. This might be a passing phase. I don't have enough evidence to say how well at this stage, but I've certainly seen students who've not written much in English and have not engaged with texts becoming much more passionate, much more involved, and writing a great deal more using online tools and online challenges and problems. The other point that was made there is Derry Wianka, who is a wonderful academic who helped write the Australian curriculum, talked about the use of shorter texts in English for looking at grammatical structure and looking at the structure of writing for the language stream of English. And of course that fits in well with my own unit, where I've used a number of short stories and episodes from television shows. This, to me, aligns with the Australian curriculum of analysing and exploring, then creating or producing, and that's seen in the concept map at the end as well. Now, my personal pedagogy I've touched on in an earlier part, but it's a modified constructivist approach. So the students are meant to be involved with knowledge creation, knowledge building in teams or individually, and their problem solving, and it's less structured than many other approaches. But I must point out that in the second point down there with the tick, my actual approach as seen in my unit of work is not as free an exploration as desired from Bareiter and Scardamalia's CSILE model that is discussed elsewhere, which is much more a student exploration of a theme and moving upwards into the more abstract building of conceptual artifact. Where I am joining with other writers in my own personal pedagogy, and where I differ from the Australian curriculum, is that what I'm really trying to do with my students is looking for an improvement on the concept of what it means to be human and how to best relate to our machines. So that's a great big abstract, and I'm looking to improve on our understanding of those 2 points. It's the improvability which I think is so attractive from that model of looking to units and their work. And finally, the last slide is the concept map, and I've put this together using Visio, with lots and lots of the readings at the top there coming from curriculum readings, experiences and discussions. The one bit that I haven't covered well in any of my work is parts 1 to 5 inclusive, is the area to the right, the red triangle saying differentiated learning, because in the brief unit of work that's outlaid and available on Mahara, quite clear that the students are all doing the same work. But in fact, I would always try and have 3 groups within the class that has separate approaches to work. 3 groups is what's recommended for English studies in the ACT where I work at the moment, and I think that's a good approach. So the differentiated learning is definitely weaker here, but if it did exist and was spelt out more strongly, as it should be, it would relate, of course, to the context, to the Australian curriculum, to the tasks themselves, which relate back to the content descriptors, and so on. I won't try and explain that mishmash of bendy arrows and colours and the various acronyms around the place, but that's how I see the concept map for the MySF unit of work. And I hope this helped to explain my pedagogical approach through studying curriculum studies in semester 2. I hope that the TPAC model, which I've talked about in part 4 of this, explained how I was using TPAC for the particular unit of work and how central and important I think that is for teaching now. And at the earlier parts also looking at the pedagogy through the IATSL standards. All of those are there, and they all relate to different parts linked together. It's a little bit messy and I'd love to work on it further. And that's what we all do as teachers, improve and work and change all the time. That's our job. And thank you for listening to this, and hope it's of interest to others.